Luntha Television, bringing wisdom into your home.
Luntha Television stands as an autonomous faith-based
Bom dia.
Good morning. Welcome.
Sia liberi che sul quarto punto dello termine.
Vabbè, l'ho tirato.
This morning, the Ninth General Congregation was marked also by free interventions in the presence of Pope Francis. We will now begin by introducing our guests. Sister Liliana Franco Echeverri, President of CLAR, the Confederation of Latin American and the Caribbean of Men and Women Religious, witness of the synodal process. She's a religious of the Company of Mary, a theologian. She also participated in the Synod for the Amazon. We remember her to have welcomed her here, and she defends that the synodal church must give rise to a new way of establishing relations that makes a renewed identity possible, more fraternal and circular. We also have with us His Excellency Monsignor Edouard Sinayobye, Bishop of Cyangugu, Rwanda. He was born in 1966 in the Diocese of Butare, where he was ordained a priest in 2000. He holds a doctorate in spiritual theology from the Pontifical Theological University Faculty Pontifical Institute of Spirituality Teresianum in Rome, and was rector of the Seminary of Niumba. In February 2021, the Pope appointed him Bishop of the Diocese of Cyangugu. And we also have with us His Excellency Monsignor Zbigniew Stankiewicz, Archbishop of Riga. He was born in 1955 in Latvia. Before being ordained a priest, he graduated in engineering from the Riga Polytechnic Institute and worked for 12 years, first in a naval center and then in a bank. He was ordained a priest in 1996, and Pope Benedict XVI appointed him Archbishop of Riga in June 2010. He's Grand Prior for Latvia of the Order of the Holy Sepulchre of Jerusalem and Vice President of the Bishops' Conference of Latvia. And for the third time, he has been member for the Unity of Christians, and for the second President of the Evangelization and Culture Commission of CCEE. We also have with us Mr. Paolo Ruffini, President of the Information Commission, and Sheila Pires, the Secretary of the Commission, to whom I'm giving the floor right away. So this morning I will be speaking in Portuguese. This morning we are going to speak about this morning's work, but also about what was done Friday afternoon, which was dedicated to the pathway section of the Instrumentum Laboris on the topic of decision-making process, transparency, accountability and evaluation. As it was very important to hear experiences from China, the Arabian Peninsula, the Amazon, the Seychelles, the Sahel, and so on. So it was very important to listen to all these experiences. The synodal members pointed out to problems such as the difficulty in finding harmony between Christian traditions and local rights, or with local civil regulations on marriage, etc. This is also because, as it was said, the Church in the past has neglected diversity and complementarity between cultures. At the same time, insights and suggestions were offered on the basis of already existing realities, such as the case of SIAMA, the Amazon Ecclesial Conference, which gives voice to different realities or the experiences of the African Church, all showing great vitality. As to children, young people and Catholic schools, there was much talk about the importance of involving children in the life of the Church, so as not to speak only of children, but with children, of valuing catechists, listening to young people, because sometimes the themes are decided for them, which one they'll be listening to, when they are interested in other things. There was also a talk of including Catholic schools in the process of evangelization and formation, since they are important resources for the Church in some parts of the world. However, it was said, the state has taken possession of these schools and agendas contrary to the Church teachings are imposed. As to the topic, the theme of women, there was also a speech on violence suffered by women religious, and this speech was very much appreciated. It talked about not just sexual abuse, but also abuses of power and conscience. It was said that there are women religious who work hard, especially to reach out to the most vulnerable. But these same women, when confronted with issues of sexual or other types of abuses, fail to express or are unable to express their concerns because of a patriarchal attitude of society whereby they remain silent. And it was proposed that in this context we should introduce procedures and systems in the diocese and bishops' conferences to address such matters and problems. Another proposal was to review contractual policies, hiring policies, to ensure the dignity for consecrated women, but also for the laity in general. Again, on women, it was noted that in most seminaries, what is lacking is a female presence of consecrated or lay women in the formation of priests, just as there is a lack of experienced lay persons. The participation of women, on the other hand, was emphasized as being fundamental because they can see things that others do not see, and they guarantee a balanced formation, enriching the general program for future priests. Thank you very much. I will hand it over to Mr. Ruffini. Thank you, Sheila. Good morning to everybody. And today will be a bit longer than the other days, but there were over 90 speeches made since Friday afternoon to this morning during the Synod's plenary. I would like to return to the theme of a greater presence of lay people and women. So during these last three general congregation, ample space was given to the topic of so-called decision-making and decision-taking processes. So in this regard, the need to set up boards of lay persons, both authoritative and experienced, was repeatedly emphasized in order to avoid overburdening those in positions of responsibility. And the importance was highlighted of establishing boards, or at least bodies, that can assist bishops or those in positions of responsibility. As to abuses, in some speeches it was said that many of the decisions, with wrong decisions made in the past on the topic of abuses on minors, were taken by bishops who probably were isolated or under pressure, and it was therefore proposed to introduce advisory committees in the diocese so that the bishop can have them at his disposal, not only to strengthen protection and prevention, but also in the event that priests accused but found innocent need to be reinstated or to have their credibility restored. There is a lot of resistance when a person is found innocent, we heard in our hall, and with the help of a board made up of psychologists, parents of abused children, social workers, assistants, it would be perhaps easier to restore the ministry to an innocent priest. Transparency. Along the same lines, it was emphasized as transparency is a fundamental element in the Synodal Church, especially in the areas of protection of vulnerable people and finances. Transparency, as it was highlighted, this transparency must always be balanced by confidentiality and respect of privacy and sensitive information. A lot was said about the topic of accountability, with a focus on the meaning of it. And we all agree on the need for being accountable. But however, we wondered, who should we be accountable to? Of course, the world, public opinion, journalists, some of the things that were said. And some of our pastoral agendas and our criteria for being in search are dictated by instances that do not come from the gospel. So the priority is being accountable to God and the community, not to fall into the traps where we end up by being accountable to parties that are not related to the evangelical ones. So, being accountable to whom? And to the church, and not to any human group. According to the principles of the gospel, we are not a board of directors, but we have the mystical body of Christ and the holy people of God. And then we must also respond to the poorest who judge us based on how we live. And this is as to accountability. Now, in connection with the enhancement of synodal realities, it was said that some synodal realities that already exist in dioceses and parish churches and episcopal conferences should be enhanced. So we should learn from the new churches, such as those from Africa, and not impose on churches new experience which are often made in articulo mortis in the churches of the West. Also, consecrated life for many years has been experimented with forms of synodality, and the discernment of monks and martyrs of Tibrin who decided to stay in Algeria in a situation of suffering and violence were mentioned, and they decided to offer their lives, not just to obey their superiors, but after following their inner discernment path in a synodal way. So the Code of Canon Law was also mentioned, and possible changes and reforms to it, the Code of Canon Law. And some members said that diocesan synods should be made mandatory. As to the topic of the updating of canon law, it was said to always bear in mind that canon law is the code. It's not just a sad instrument to oblige people, but it's an expression of the respect of the church. It is like a shield protecting the most vulnerable. Another interesting comment was made on the pastoral experience of an African church that for some years has been organizing Sunday Sunday meetings without priests, because there are no more priests to involve several villages. So these are assemblies in which the faithful get together under the responsibility of authoritative laypersons or catechists to listen to the Word of God and receive communion. These assemblies do not live separated, but they participate in the entire ecclesial life of the parish and the diocese, then of course making sure that governance is provided. I would like to end with the topic of clericalism that should be avoided at all costs. So the antidote for this is that of closeness among bishops, with the priests, with God, and with the people of God. Dynamic and never static relationships, relationships that envisage direct involvement in decision-making processes. And in this connection, it was said that the word consultative in the Church means the obligation of listening and taking into account. Many persons underscored that when a decision is made, the reasons behind these decisions, why these decisions are made, highlighting pros and cons or weaknesses and strengths in decision-making processes. And the formula of St. Cyprian was also recorded: nothing without the personal responsibility of the bishop, nothing without the advice of the presbyters, nothing without the consensus or the consent of the people of God. We apologize for being so long, but we had many things to sum up for you today. Thank you, Sheila. Thank you, Dr. Ruffini. So many different themes: social, cultural, realities that are widely different. And in this connection, I would like to ask specific about it. Thank you. Good afternoon. I would like to begin by thanking you. Thank you for your service in the synodal process. In the past few days, we deepened this step in the pathways in the Instrumentum Laboris, which is divided into formation, discernment, participation, and assessment or verification. And this places us before the action of Jesus, evangelical values, the style that must permeate everything that is synodal. And in some way, these great four themes try to respond to these questions. In other words, how to be a synodal church in a mission. And we recognized that formation is meaningful only if we provided as witnesses committed to what we were called to with an integral formation. And we hope that this formation starts from an anthropological and human foundation, an inclusive formation in a context and with attention to reality, but also a focus was placed on the importance of formation with the others. So doing things together within the context of the formation process that allows us to adopt the style of Jesus. Within this theme of formation, we also talked about the importance of casting our gaze on young people, children, journeying with them, walking with them, and also to being like them. And in this sense, we talked about the importance of the institutions of the church, well, schools, NGOs, universities, as platforms that can truly help us permeate new forms of formation to be ourselves better witnesses. In connection with discernment, we continue to grow, convinced that discernment offers us the possibility of understanding what the Spirit is requiring of us as a church, and that the reality of the church is very diverse. We live in times and continents that are widely different, and we also have different priorities. So even the key to be able to respond to needs at the territorial level is precisely discernment. When we talk about discernment, we talk about personal discernment to be able to understand the will of God, but also communal discernment that allows us to look for, together within this great diversity and the certainty that we are all brothers and sisters, so look for the certainty of our journey and of our mission. And therefore also the importance of participation structures, pastoral councils, economic councils, the various bodies and people whom we have in order to increase participation. This morning's session was devoted to transparency and accountability, not really as a tool, but as a culture. So transparency, accountability, all are part of a culture that must exist in the church and that must permeate also our ways and also the identity of the church. Transparency and accountability, therefore, is a new way of being in the church, and which we would like to be something more of an everyday life thing. So this is what we talked about. Thank you for highlighting such an important set of themes, particularly what you said about transparency and accountability. We shall now give the floor to His Excellency Monsignor Edward Sinayobye, Bishop of Cyangugu, sorry. His Excellency, we would like to know from you, 30 years have elapsed since the terrible genocide that marked the history of Rwanda and the whole of Africa. So what's the situation like today, and how has the Church followed this process of rebirth and also the synodal journey? So how has it helped? Thank you. Thank you very much. I wish to thank everybody for your work, because you are doing a synodal work in support of the Synod and the Church. First of all, I would like to share with you what I feel as a participant and as a representative of the Episcopal Conference of Rwanda. So how I am experiencing personally the Synod, how I'm living it. So what we are doing in the Synod reminds me a bit of what the apostles lived and experienced, and what the apostles did when they were in the high chamber, as it's been told in the Cenacle, in the Acts of the Apostles. They received the gift of the Holy Spirit, the Last Supper. And so the text tells us that they were a single heart around the Virgin Mary and Peter and Jesus. And we are living a synodal assembly around Pope Francis, who is a sign, and at the same time he has this charism reinforcing the unity of the Church. I would like to share with you my synodal experience in Rwanda. In this synodal process, there is a process or reconciliation and unity in our country. So as you know, 30 years have elapsed since the terrible genocide in Rwanda. And I must say that despite the fact that so many years have passed, it's as if it happened yesterday. The consequences of the genocide are many. And we as a church, we try to work at the pastoral level to try and heal people, to accompany them, to accompany both the victims and the perpetrators, the culprits. When we started this synodal process as a conference, episcopal conference, we received this process as a kairos. There is a word that strikes us in particular, and that is communion. This is a concept which is very eloquent to the heart of Rwanda: reconciliation, communion. These are words that are important for us. And we set up a special commission of bishops. And we gave them a mission, in other words, coordinating the activities of the synodal process in all dioceses. And I would like to share with you some themes or items. The first being that of pastoral care of the unity and reconciliation in our country, so this ministry. And this is also a way to answer the question I was asked. So what does the Church do? What is the Church doing in this process of healing, in this rebirth and resurrection process, we could say, after the tragedy of the genocide? The Synod is something that we are living as an opportunity. The opportunity of strengthening unity and reconciliation in our country. The Synod is something that we live as a teaching that provides us with the biblical and theological foundations for us to be able to understand that we are one thing. For us in Rwanda to talk about fraternity, unity, is truly a message which is very well received by people, and it helps people walk together, journey together, because after everything that has happened, we are learning to be brothers and sisters and to enter into this ideal of fraternity. So we see the Synod as a process that is not just social, but also, I would say, spiritual, a process that helps us understand that the journey since the genocide, well, the journey we must undertake is a fraternal lifestyle and a spiritual lifestyle. So we follow the guidelines of the Synod, which remind us of the modus vivendi and the modus operandi of the Church. It's not easy talking about reconciliation in a country that has experienced the tragedy of genocide, because we must accompany the victims and the perpetrators. And this is something that we do in all parishes. And this Synod has helped us considerably. It was a space in which we were truly capable of, and we're still doing so, capable of deepening the way in which we can address reconciliation. It is a journey we are continuing to make. And the Synod is truly an opportunity to deepen the different approaches. We have different approaches aimed at creating unity in Rwanda and to help everybody live in a spirit of communion, synodality and fraternity. And I would like to share with you a witness of what I am experiencing personally at the Synod. On the topic of pastoral proximity, well, the Synod is at the service of everybody, and it allows everybody to participate in the listening stage in all dioceses. We try to make visits and meetings with all the members of the people of God. So children, ecclesial community at the grassroots level, consecrated men and women, people who are marginalized, prisoners, street children, persons with disabilities, prostitutes. We try to go to reach out to everybody. So being truly a church that reaches out, and through these encounters and visits in all the dioceses. And this synod also gave us the opportunity to be missionaries, learn to be missionaries. And this means not only the missionary activity of priests or consecrated persons, but also the mission of the laity. We are following a missionary formation and practice process, which involves priests, consecrated men and women, but also lay persons. So we go to all families in some dioceses. For instance, in my diocese, we decided for this title, Christ in Every Family. And I was so much struck by seeing Christians, consecrated men and women, priests, all united to go and visit these families. So this synod is something that we truly appreciate. It is helping us reinforce our ministry in Rwanda after the tragedy of genocide. Thank you, Your Excellency. And we shall now give the floor to His Excellency Stankiewicz, the Archbishop of Riga, who is going to talk about the Instrumentum Laboris number 58, which I think it's the first time we are addressing it, and which refers to discernment. The floor is yours. Good evening. I will make a brief introduction. I would like to say that this synod responds to a deep desire in my heart to involve every baptized person in the mission of the Church, making everybody a missionary and evangelizer, involving people in the mission in order to expand the kingdom of God in the world, evangelizing the world. When I was proclaimed a bishop, in my first interview, I spontaneously answered this question, what is my strategic goal? Well, I said it's the spiritual rebirth of Latvia, involving all the Catholics, other Christians, and all men and women of goodwill. And in this sense, in this synod, my deep conviction concerning its goal is that of freeing the gifts and the charisms of every baptized person. So this is a task of pastors, bishops, parish priests, and the leaders of the different groups which exist within the Church. And this is also related to the topic of co-responsibility, the co-responsibility of everyone. And when we talk about co-responsibility, this is also related to decentralization, but not in a secular or democratic manner, but rather as an ecclesial communion and a spiritual communion from this perspective. I would like now to make reference to the item 58 in the Instrumentum Laboris, ecclesial discernment for the mission. In that text, which refers to Gaudium et Spes 11, we read that the people of God tries to discern in events, requests, and aspirations which are the true signs of the presence or the design of God. So the final goal of our synod is the mission. In other words, making our parish communities on the move and the various structures of the Church more missionary. As the president of the Commission for Evangelization and Culture within the Council of Episcopal Conferences of Europe, I heard from many European bishops express the wish of knowing the positive experience of other episcopal conferences in the pastoral field. And we made a survey, and the information provided was collected, and we sent it out to all episcopal conferences in Europe. And I think that it's going to be useful to explore the pastoral practices which are the most successful in the field of evangelization, also in the episcopal conferences of other countries or continents. We've noticed that during the last few years, there was a great increase in the number of schools for evangelization. So initiatives, and it was mentioned here, initiatives that show how synodal and missionary formation is needed. And these schools for evangelization, you might have heard the name of a layperson, Jose Prado Flores, a Mexican, who launched so many of these schools. There's a true wave, but he's not the only one to have promoted this movement. And then there are also other initiatives which involve the laity and which provide formation and kindle this fire, this wish for evangelizing, for evangelization, for moving on and taking people to church. And for instance, there is an initiative that was the Synodality in Canada, Divine Renovation, that's its name, that from a dying parish led to a flourishing parish with almost 80 different ministries and 800 people who are involved in this voluntary work in the parish. And so this means that we must discern in this direction. In other words, look where the Spirit of God acts, where there are good fruit, and learn from it, sharing them. Learn from them and share them. So I think this is very important. It's something that we should also be doing during the Synod, but after it as well. Thank you. Undoubtedly, the Synod is always a journey. So, now the floor goes over to our colleague journalists. Luis Modino, let us begin with you.
Luis Miguel Modino de la Arquidiócesis de Manaus. Mi pregunta es para...
From the Archdiocese of Manaus. The question is for Sister Liliana. So, as Cristiane was saying at the beginning, you participated in the Synod for the Amazon, and you are also participating in the Synod on Synodality. You are also a member of the team of the Ecclesial Assembly for Latin America and the Caribbean, and following the request by Pope Francis, also concerning the Sixth Episcopal Conference for Latin America for the Amazonian region, which in this very synod was also made the object of listening. In other words, listening to the territory and everything was highlighted. So do you believe that this listening has become a more explicit dynamic in the life of the Church, not just in Latin America and the Caribbean? So how do you see the churches of other continents in this light? Thank you. These last two synods, including that of youth, and these experiences we are making in the different continents, place us before the importance of listening as a cross-sectional aspect common to all humanization processes. The Synod of the Amazon already stated very strongly that listening brings to conversion, and that what truly has the power of generating a change or changing attitudes and structures is precisely listening to the Word of God and listening to the territories and realities. And I believe that we are really making an exercise. All these synodal experiences at the end of the day are like workshops that allow us to be able to provide a better service. There is still so much to learn in the church and in society, because very often we human beings move on with our monologues, our ideas, our paradigms. But I think that listening continues to be the formula to be able to understand the narrative of God, to be able to understand human beings. Listening gives us the possibility of getting closer in a more respectful way to the will of God. So listening changes us, converts us, and I think that we are still in this process of learning. There are particular churches, continental ones, which have already collected many experiences in this sense, and they are very far advanced in this process of listening. So listening as a vital activity, life-giving activity. As a church, we have this great challenge before our eyes, listening and journeying towards conversion, towards credibility in the unique time that we are going through as a church and a society. Thank you. And there's another question. Question for Monsignor Edward. Some days ago in this hall, a U.S. journalist recalled that the council reintroduced permanent diaconate, leaving to the individual local churches to follow up on this opportunity. So he was saying that while we've got churches such as in the United States has got tens of thousands of deacons, there are some, as in, let's say, Mozambique, because there was a Mozambican bishop there, where after 6 years there's not even one deacon. So my question is the following. If Rome were to authorize a local church, let's say that of Canada, to follow the same pathway to admit women to diaconate, your personal feelings, so what you know about the other bishops, how they feel about it, would you see this as a legitimate plurality within the church, or as, let's say, a break up in communion?
Merci beaucoup pour la question.
Thank you for your question. In our country, well, in Africa, we do not have the service of permanent diaconate. We have diaconate, which is a step towards priesthood. So this is maybe the first thing that we must say. And the other aspect, and perhaps this is what you were referring to in your question, we have women, the issue of women's diaconate. Well, as everybody knows, up until now, the question or request was made. The question was made by several people, not just journalists, but also other people from the church herself. And it is a matter which we are studying. And this ongoing study is very serious and very deep, considering the light that has already been shed on this by the magisterium. So it's not the first time the magisterium addresses this theme, and there is a whole set of teachings. We've got a very rich heritage to rely on, and which explains or clarifies this matter. So you were asking if there was an authorization, let's say, what would my impression be or my feelings be? Well, I am in total communion with the other bishops, and particularly with the Holy Father. And I do not see. So if the Pope, with all the services of his ministry, to say, well, this is a possibility, we must follow these lines, I would have no problem in following it. I am at the service of this church, so it's not a matter of feelings or opinion. We pastors, we represent the people of God. We are the custodians of faith. And we are human beings like everybody else, of course, but our feelings, our sensitivities are not important. I mean, they do not come beforehand. We are within a dynamic of communion with the entire church. Thank you, Your Excellency. Any more questions from the hall? Manuela from ANSA. The question is for any of the speakers. Sheila Pires was telling us about interventions concerning the topic of abuses, sexual abuses, and abuses of power against women religious. I would like to know if from this synod some guidance may come out or a greater awareness. A lot was done about pedophilia, but the topic of abuses against women religious seems to be not as strongly highlighted. Is there the possibility, in your opinion, that some indications may come out of the synod more specifically? Sheila, would you like to answer, or shall we give the floor to the other speakers? Or Dr. Ruffini, of course.
Bom, o assunto foi mencionado.
Well, this theme was focused on during today's present speeches during the sharing phase. So we are at a stage whereby we are analyzing the instrumentum laboris, and we are also mentioning or talking about what happens in the church outside of the instrumentum laboris. So we don't know if this is something that is going to stay or not and remain in the final document. We are still analyzing it. I think probably because this is a very important theme in some regions in particular in the world. We have heard a lot about the abuses on women religious, not just in Africa, but also in other regions. So we shall see what happens up to the end of the synod. Thank you. In society, just as within the church, we are somehow used, or we have gotten used to living within very strict relations, nationalisms and styles that exclude all the others. So the great challenge for all of us is that of purifying our relations precisely to be able to create this culture of care and religious life, consecrated life in the entire world is taking this theme very seriously. In our continent, at least, we are living processes that are very clear with 150,000 religious who live in Latin America and the Caribbean, so that we may work on our relations. And often not enough space is granted to differences. So within the church herself, we are in this process of reviewing our relational modes, which are not consistent with Jesus' style and that do not bring to conversion. And women's religious life is not at the margins of all this. Sometimes within the communities and the congregations, there may be ways that are not inspired by a true culture of care. So we must recognize ways that come from the external and that may run the risk of damaging women. This synodal process places us before the need to revise these processes and focus more on relations. So focus more on the option of the culture of care, considering the style of Jesus. I would just like to add that the theme of abuses against women religious concerns this synod, in the sense that this represents an obstacle to the mission, because it creates a scandal in external environments, and it also wounds and suffocates these people who are the victims of the abuses. So, in this sense, yes, the answer is yes. And then, as to diaconate of married couples in Latvia, some 10 years ago, I ordained the first married deacon, and now in my diocese there are already 3 deacons, and every day I pray not just for priestly vocations but also to the permanent diaconate, and also I pray for the vocations of the laity, for the entire mission of the Church, because we do need them in all different contexts. Very good. Thank you, Monsignor Stankiewicz. So if there are no further questions, or maybe Tiziana Peragò from Vatican News. Tiziana Campisi, Vatican News. I have a question for Monsignor Edward, and I would like to ask him what answer there was among people vis-à-vis the synodal journey that you proposed, since the country is going through this, is following this journey towards unity and reconciliation. So this synodal proposal, how was it accepted or received by people? Thank you. Thank you for your question. Well, first of all, in this synod, right at the beginning of the synod, we bishops sent a message out to everybody. So being together, united in a process, in a journey which concerns everybody. And this message already, which is addressed to all the inhabitants of Rwanda to get together, this already is an important message. And this is already a contribution to reconciliation. And then we also chose, as a synodal process in the listening phase, to organize meetings and visits and have human contacts, meaning that Christians or consecrated persons, priests, would set up groups to then try and reach out to people, to go in schools, and also visit also prisons. In our prisons, there are many of these inmates who are those that were accused of the crime of genocide. So you realize that getting in touch with people from the outside world and who go to the inmates to talk about communion, peace, reconciliation, and forgiveness. So you realize how important this contribution is. And for this reason, I'm saying that this synod is something that we are living as an opportunity, the opportunity of strengthening the pastoral care or the ministry of unity and reconciliation. The synod gives us the biblical foundations. It's not a social process. It means truly to live together in communion. Thank you. Thank you, Your Excellency. Well, I think we can close it for today. It's almost 2:30. I wish you to enjoy your lunch if you have not had it yet. Thanks to all of our guests, our Monsignor Edward, Bishop Stankiewicz, Sister Echeverry, and Mr. Dr. Sheila Pires and Dr. Ruffini. And let us also thank the interpreters who thank you back. Thank you again for being here with us, and see you tomorrow.